Freedom of expression is the cornerstone of any democratic society. You cannot say that there is a true democracy where the right of all individuals to seek, receive, and impart information freely, without censorship and without fear of being punished for it, is not protected. We're talking about a fundamental right that also serves as a mechanism for the defense of other human rights, including the rights of minorities and groups that are marginalized or discriminated against. The emergence of the Internet has meant an enormous progress in this regard. Today, this tool is the most powerful way to expand freedom of expression, understood as both the right to spread ideas and the right to seek and receive information of all kinds. However, freedom of expression is not an absolute right. In some cases, it has to be restricted in order to protect other human rights. The problem when it comes to the Internet is that the rules that govern this network must be able to protect all the rights that are at stake, without compromising the potential of the web. Given that this is a decentralized and open media, it's not an easy thing to achieve. It often happens that the measures taken to protect other valuable rights involve the risk of dramatically limiting the positive impact of the Internet. Because of this, we need guidelines in order to resolve these conflicts appropriately. The Special Rapporteur for Freedom of Expression of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights issued a report called Freedom of Expression and the Internet, a document that explains the general principles and criteria to resolve conflicts of rights in the digital environment. Broadly speaking, this document concerns the issue of Internet governance. The report is intended to serve as a guide for governments, legislators, regulators, courts, and civil society in general. Let's see what it says. First, there are 5 general principles: universal access, non-discrimination, pluralism, privacy, and net neutrality. With the possible exception of net neutrality, which requires a little bit of context, these are all easy to understand. Universal access means that states must promote access of all people to the network. That involves expanding internet infrastructure, but also promoting digital literacy. That is, to ensure that people, even in the most remote places, know how to use these technologies to exercise the right to freedom of expression. Non-discrimination means that states must ensure that neither laws nor social, economic, and cultural conditions establish barriers that limit people in their right to use the internet. The same goes for ideological reasons, gender, race, language, geographic location, or any other. Meanwhile, pluralism as a principle means that any action that may affect the internet must be designed to ensure that more, not less, people, ideas, opinions, and information become involved in the public deliberation through this medium. With regard to privacy, the thing is that freedom of expression cannot be fully effective without the protection afforded by this right. So there needs to be safeguards to ensure that private data of individuals is protected against arbitrary interference. Finally, net neutrality basically means that all data is created equally. All the ones and zeros, the information, as far as we are concerned, are equally important. What kind of treatment would be unfair? For example, it is possible to make a website load faster than others or to just filter certain information. Unfortunately, some governments or ISPs take such measurements affecting end users without them knowing. Understood? Good, because there's more. The document of the Special Rapporteur also provides criteria and principles for more specific topics. We don't have time to list them all, but it's worth mentioning the following points. 1. Filters and blocks. In principle, neither states nor intermediaries can filter or block internet content. However, there are very rare cases in which a judge or an independent authority, through a transparent and fair process, can determine that it is essential to filter specific information. This can only happen when it has been shown that this information affects other human rights in a disproportionate and arbitrary way. 2. Intermediaries. A bit of background first. The internet depends on a number of intermediaries that enable the network to operate properly. This includes companies that provide internet service, but also, amongst others, the platforms where people post and find content. Intermediaries are a more vulnerable target than users when control over the network is exercised, and that is why we must protect them, to avoid barriers or blocks to the flow of information. So, intermediaries should not be held responsible for the content they carry. They are not the ones who should be prosecuted, but rather the people who generate unlawful content. Nor should they be required to monitor the content they carry, as this would remove any viability of their operation and in practice result in a way to filter or block internet content. On the other hand, intermediaries must establish clear and transparent terms of service for users in all matters relating to freedom of expression and privacy. Finally, intermediaries must be able to inform the public about the requests that they receive from government agencies regarding the delivery of user data. Whenever intermediaries deem these requests constitute a violation of human rights, they should be able to challenge the legality of those requests. Of course, intermediaries cannot refuse to comply with a court order if they are in a position to do so. 3. Copyright. While there is a public interest in protecting copyrights, it's also important to consider the need for the promotion of culture, education, access to information, and as always, the protection of the Internet as a democratizing medium. For this reason, it is considered that measures to protect copyright must be proportionate and they cannot affect other content, nor the functionality of the network itself. If you think about it, this point is a direct consequence of the previous two. What is happening right now is that the middlemen are being held accountable for content that violates copyright, and we also see cases in which the mechanisms for filtering or blocking content are used without due process. Neither of these things should happen according to the principles of the Special Rapporteur. 4. Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity refers to the security of critical or essential infrastructure and the safety of users. Nothing more than that. The reason why we should stick to this definition is that this is a relatively new concept, and it's important that we don't use it to define new crimes that could potentially render illegal the use of the Internet in practice. 5. Surveillance programs. Surveillance programs are legitimate in some cases, but since they have an enormous potential to invade and violate privacy and freedom of expression, they must be carefully designed and rigorously monitored. Surveillance should only be applied in exceptional circumstances. It should always pursue a legitimate cause, and it should respond to an objective, specific, and serious threat. But not only that, it must be established that surveillance is the right course of action to avoid that particular threat. To review, the protection of freedom of expression is intimately linked to the growth of the Internet. There are many situations in which it is necessary to limit this right in order to protect other human rights, but in all these cases we must be extremely careful. That entails following due process and avoiding the use of large-scale interventions to the network, because these are the kinds of measures that threaten the open and free nature of the web. Although this is not always the most practical way to do things, it certainly is the best for the public interest.